From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we preview the Broncos versus LA Rams, the Christmas Day game between the 4-10 Broncos and, amazingly, the 4-10 LA Rams. I think a lot of people expected this to be sort of a tune-up for both teams as they were in their respective conferences heading into the playoffs when the schedule came out in May. But here we are, both teams eliminated. And, I mean, there's reasons for both, right? I mean, we certainly look at both these teams, and it hasn't gone the way either of them projected the season to go. I think the LA Rams, because they won a championship last year, they're probably saying to themselves, yeah, this wasn't great, but we can accept it because we have our championship. The Broncos have had a multitude of losing seasons, missing the playoffs. They haven't been back since 2015. I think the Broncos had envisioned a much different product, but yet here we are.
Yeah, not exactly what the schedule makers had planned when they set this thing out. I think you were looking at a returning Super Bowl champ versus an emerging AFC West, toughest division in football on paper at the time anyway. With Russell Wilson at the helm, and instead you get two teams that are already eliminated from the playoffs. Baker Mayfield trying to resuscitate that career,
right?
Nathaniel Hackett coaching for his job. I think that there's
still a lot to play for here.
Yeah, there's still plenty to play for. I don't think either one of these teams is going to pack it in, but I think that this game may not have had the same shine that it had when they put it on the schedule.
No, and it's amazing because you think about the LA Rams and all of that offensive firepower. Not to mention Sean McVay, an offensive coach, an offensive genius. And I'm looking at these numbers. I mean, the 32nd in yards per play, 31st in points per game, 30th in rushing, 25th in passing, 29th in interceptions, 18th in red zone. Sacks allowed, they're tied with the Broncos for 51 sacks allowed, 31st in the NFL. So it's just not what we're accustomed to seeing with an LA Rams Sean McVay team, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, a lot of injuries, a lot of bodies out. It's across the board, systemic. I mean, you look at how many receivers they're down. The quarterback situation. They've had 4 quarterbacks start this year. The running back situation was in a state of flux all year. Is he going to be traded? Are they going to cut? That kind of stuff.
Makers, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a wild kind of ride for the Rams as they have a Super Bowl hangover over there. There's some bright spots on the defense still. I don't think Jalen Ramsey is the player that he used to be, but he's still a very good player. I think Floyd, I think Greg Gaines, I think those guys are pretty good. Obviously, Aaron Donald in there, so that definitely hurts them. But I still think there are things to like about the Rams as a football team overall, even though they've been kind of decimated, just like the Broncos.
Yeah, I'll preview the defense here in just a second, but just on the offensive side of the ball, you're right. Baker Mayfield's going to be starting. They've had Wolford out there. They have Perkins out there. Stafford's been out for several weeks. So some of these numbers I think you can explain away a little bit by the quarterback play. Of course, Cooper Kupp, who was the Super Bowl MVP, he hasn't been playing for a month plus now. They're without Allen Robinson. So, yeah, it's an absolutely decimated roster when it comes to that. They're also now Skowronek. One of the bright spot wide receivers, he's going to be out for the remainder of the season. Mm-hmm. Their starting center is going to be out for the remainder of the season in Allen. So this is a tough deal there for the LA Rams offense. But that's where the Broncos defense, who I think has had moments this year where they've been brilliant, and there's been moments where they've let teams sort of hang around or close out games when the defense needed to get the ball back to the offense. This could be one of those games where I think they're going to be able to get a couple of turnovers on that offense. I'm hoping that the Broncos defense can maybe have even a score in this one, something that they have not really had.
They've got to capitalize. I think that's the thing. Whether it's the defense taking it in, whether the offense, they got to put more points up, period. You can't just put it all on the defense who's been playing brilliantly all year and hang on them for a last series when they're gassed and expect them to live up to it. The offense has to hold up its end. And they've scored more points the last couple of weeks. The defensive competition hasn't been as stout with Kansas City and Arizona, but they've certainly scored more points, and that's an encouraging sign. They need to continue to score more points. I'd like to see them break the 24-point barrier and keep it there, but wishful thinking maybe. I think that, we talked about all the injuries the Rams have had. I mean, the Broncos have had their share of injuries, too. Russell Wilson's missed a couple of games.
They have more players on IR.
Tim Patrick missed the season. You're down to, you're down to 4th and 5th string guards at this point. It's not like and running backs that were on people's practice squad. So it's not like the Broncos haven't had their share of injuries to balance that out, too. But I think both those teams are still playing hard. I mean, we watched the Rams take on the Packers, and I thought they were still trying to play hard in a losing effort. And Broncos, of course, played hard in a winning effort against the Cardinals. So neither one of these teams have packed it in.
Well, I don't think that either. So, yes, if you want to go ahead and preview the Broncos offense versus the Rams defense, let's go ahead and get into that because I could clearly tell that's the direction you want to go because you keep going back there. So let's go Rams defense, who you said it. And I think I want to include Bobby Wagner, who I think is having a pretty good season too, who came over from the Seattle Seahawks. No, I mean, they're still second in the league in red zone. The Broncos are the number 1 red zone defense. The Rams are the number 2 red zone defense. And they only give up 100 yards rushing, 140 yards rushing per game. So they still are one of those teams, even though they've been relatively close games, they aren't closing out. And again, when you see a championship team, most of the time you figured out how to win. But I'd say if we're going to take a look at this team just on the overview, it's clearly still the defense that is the strength of this LA Rams team. And whatever opportunity they have, not only in this game or the remaining games of the season, it's going to be the defense making plays for them, much like the Broncos offense has been in a similar situation. Yeah,
the Rams need explosive plays on offense and the defense to hold up their end if they're going to compete. I mean, that's just how it's going to be. This Broncos offense, I think, can have some success against the Rams defense. I'm not saying they're decimated, but they're certainly down, and not having Aaron Donald is huge. I mean, that's a difference maker. You go back and look at the Super Bowl, he was the difference in the Super Bowl. I think that they can have success. I think you can run the football, and I think we saw that. I think if you go back to the Packers game, you saw what Aaron Jones we were able to do. I think that the Broncos can quite easily do that as well. I think Latavius Murray was very succinct in his post-game presser after the Cardinals game, talking about just the commitment to the ground game and staying committed to it. I also think it gives the offensive line something that they don't have to worry about. You're going downhill. All you got to do is outmuscle your guy. That's it. Mm-hmm. You just got to hit your guy, outmuscle him, and keep moving him downhill. It's not like you're stepping back or you have to pick up some guy that's looping around on a stunt or any of that kind of stuff. And for a team that's probably going to have backup guards playing, that's probably a smart thing.
The Broncos, I mean, offensively, have sort of picked up a couple of their numbers. I know that, again, we're looking for some silver linings here because the offense has been dead last basically across the board. But the Broncos offense now at a blistering 15.6 points per game.
Right, yeah, they come up from 13.9 to 15.6 points per game. Good enough to still be last in the NFL.
Still last in the NFL.
But we're still, we're not.
No.
We want...
But 25th in red zone now, right? They were dead last, right? They're 25th now, the 50%, which again is not great. But the Rams are 16th and they're 54%. So really, we're not talking about a major change here. The Broncos were perfect in the red zone the last 2 weeks. So if you want to talk about trends where the Broncos could sort of build on, right? Not only getting over 20, 24 points per game like they have over the last 2 weeks, but it's also red zone execution. You want to continue to move that number up. And as you can see, they're 25th right now, 50%, but just to go up 4 more percent, you're middle of the pack in the league. And just to think about the Broncos for a moment, how bad this season has been, especially on the offensive side of the ball, to sort of see some of these numbers move up just a little bit, that's something you can hang your hat on after the fact. Because I know for a fact the defense, when we talked to them in the offseason, hey, you were the number 1 red zone defense, that means something to them.
Yeah, it did. That's their identity. We're good in the red zone. We may bend, but we won't break. We're not going to let you score points, those kinds of things. This year, they're number 2 on third downs. They take pride in that as well. So there are, I don't want to say they get caught up in statistics because that's not true, but there are moments where you hang you kind of have a pride about what you've accomplished.
Yeah, from going from dead last to somehow middle of the pack. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, I know for Broncos fans, that's going to feel like an orange slices or moral victory conversation, but it's just an acknowledgement of how bad it's been and then what you can close the season on and say, look what we were able to do, guys, when we were able to focus in and get this thing right.
I always hated that orange slices thing because there's such a thing as incremental wins.
Yeah.
There's such a thing as, hey, we got better, and as we keep getting better, we'll keep chipping away until we get to be best, kind of thing.
But you know how people are. It's either you win or you lose.
Right.
And oftentimes with Broncos fans, it's either we're winning championships or we're terrible and we should fire everybody.
And these false dichotomies, this false binary, kind of thing. And, in the end, the Broncos were a good football team and had a bad offense, and then that they didn't win the games that they probably should have. You look at all the close games that they've had, they didn't get any of the bounces they got in the Super Bowl run season. So I think this team, is trying to find its offensive identity and trying to get comfort and confidence in the fact that they can replicate what they're doing now next year when they get all the pieces back, and I think that's what they're playing for.
Yeah, right now you're 22nd, the Broncos offense, 22nd in passing, 23rd in rushing. So some of those numbers again sort of creeping up a little bit.
Top of the bottom third.
Yeah, right. I mean, again, that's what I'm saying. It sort of feels like a silver linings kind of conversation, but like I said, from where they've been, and they're still dead last in third down percentage, so that's something that you can maybe chip away at in this game as you're taking on a defense that is 23rd. They give up 41% third down conversion.
Yep.
And the Broncos are 28. So certainly maybe some opportunities. And we saw some sustained drives with Brett Rippon out there against Arizona. Now, again, it's Arizona, but you saw some sustained drives. The Broncos, when after they'd figured out a couple of things against Kansas City, they started to get some sustained drives. They started to be able to move the ball. And I do think Jerry Jeudy and his emergence at the outside receiver at the X has been a big part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really do. I think that Jerry Jeudy, I don't want to say he was miscast in the slot, but he certainly found his position over there at the X. They've been giving him about a 75-25, 80-20 split over there, and he certainly just feasted. The more targets you get him, the more effective he's been. And that's, they say that's true about all receivers. It's not, but it's true about a lot of receivers. And so Jerry's he's thriving on that. We haven't seen a lot of the drops, the things that plagued Jerry Jeudy early on in his career. We haven't really seen those over this little stretch. So I'm kind of excited as we watch his evolution. And, I want to see where these other receivers fit into this offense if he's over there.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go. That's our preview of the Broncos versus Rams. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.